I hope everyone's doing amazing today. This is my entry into the Rockler Desk Challenge put on by the Modern Maker podcast. With the state of the world today, more people are working from home and schooling from home. So space is not only a commodity, but a necessity for sanity. This for us was the driving force in designing a bed for our son that incorporated a hidden desk. I'll jump into the design a little bit more later in the video, but the idea is the center panel of the footboard pops up and is held in place. This gives him the ability to have a workspace that's compact and usable within his room.
Alright, now one of the biggest reasons I use SketchUp is because of tools like Cut List. This gives me the ability to print off basically all the layouts of what I need to do to cut out my plywood and Cut List. So I work off this. If you do buy my plans and you are not familiar with SketchUp, I actually break this down within the plans, so you can check that out there, or you can buy the SketchUp only plans, which obviously you can print your own Cut List from that.
So just for funsies, I decided to add some material constraints from previous Modern Maker podcast Rockler challenges. So the whole bed was built from one sheet of plywood and two 2x4s. More on the 2x4s later.
Alright, I had my robot cut out the templates for the legs, and I'm just tracing those onto the plywood blanks, which I'll cut out on the bandsaw and then come back and use a templating bit on my router just to clean all my edges up.
Leg pieces are pretty small, so I made sure to take off as much material as possible at the bandsaw without going over my lines. This will put less stress on the router bit and really just make it a lot less sketchy when I'm using the patterning bit to final shape the legs. The only real tricky cut I had to make was the top rail of the headboard. I set the angle of my table saw to match the taper of the legs. And yes, the arbor on my table saw does tilt towards where the fence would normally sit. With all my pieces cut out, I could start edge banding and prepping for paint. I don't do a lot of edge banding, but what I'm realizing is having a proper setup makes everything go a lot smoother. And if you haven't seen my workbench project, I'll just post a link here so you can go check that out. Being able to click my pieces on vertically made the whole process so much easier.
Alright, so to make sure that my pocket holes miss the brackets for the bed frame hardware, I actually made a template and I just actually drew it on my square, just with non-permanent ink. So now that I've done that, I can wipe that off. But I'll be drilling pocket holes at these intersections. That way I am missing, again, the hardware for the bed.
The footboard needed pocket holes to attach the top support to the legs. So I drew a center line and lined it up with the registration marks on my pocket hole jig. I dry assembled all of my pieces just to make sure everything lined up properly. I did this on both the footboard and the headboard before breaking everything down for preparation for paint. By the way, these builds are fueled by subscribers like you, so if you haven't hit that subscription bell, I'd super appreciate it. Also, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future projects. So with the Rockler Desk Challenge, I thought I would also use some material constraints based on the other two challenges. So I got two 2x4s. I mean, that's okay, right? That's not cheating. There's only two. While the paint was drying on my other pieces, I started cutting out the materials I needed for the bed slats and the slat supports. I also milled up the material I would need to create the supports for the desktop. The slat supports were glued and then screwed into place. From there, I moved on to assembling the headboard, which I actually pre-finished before assembly with Maker Brand Simple Finish.
So I was overcomplicating this. I was going to use sauce hinges. They are the mini little foldy guys like this. These things are awesome. I use these on the workbench. However, it's just going to be way easier to use a piano hinge.
With my piano hinge cut to length, I could steal my wife's iron again, and I could finish some last minute edge banding before moving on to attaching the piano hinge to the desktop. I find it significantly easier to glue the piano hinge in place before attaching the screws, and from there I moved on to attaching it to the footboard of the bed. When the desk isn't in use, I decided to use push-to-open magnetic latches that just attach on the inside of the footboard. With my magnetic latches in place, I was able to reattach the knockdown bed hardware. All right, now we're getting into the interesting stuff. I have dry assembled the bed and it works. The mechanism does what I need it to. So what I need to do is I've built a little kickstand which holds this level, and I need to design the arm that's going to go down to the bottom. And what's going to catch it on the top is these little stop blocks right here that I just cut at 45 on the table saw. So these are really just scrap that I used. So the idea now is I'm going to get these glued in place, and then I'm going to be able to measure out for the little legs. Extra 2x4 material, I can make the desk supports, which are hidden within the lower rail of the footboard. I made the lower rail just oversized so I'd be able to split it in half. And then I held my two pieces together so I'd be able to cut out the sections which would become the two supports for the desk that get hidden inside that bottom rail. The lower rail is actually doing double duty. With the desk up, the side rails actually rest on top of the lower rail for support. I used my template to set the angle on my miter saw. And then I cut out the sections of the rail that would become the side supports. The remaining sections of the bottom rail just get brad nailed and glued in place. And I use a 1/4 inch scrap of plywood just so I'd be able to set the right reveal so the leg had something to sit on top of. I didn't want the desk supports to be an object that were not attached to the rail. If you have boys in your house, you know that most things become swords. So I attached rare earth magnets to both each leg and then on the underside of the footboard so I'd be able to hide away the leg when it wasn't in use. With that, I could finish the desktop and move all the parts for the bed up to my son's room for setup. A few years ago, I built a bed for Aaron and I. I'll link the video above. And at that time, we brought the first Haven mattress into our house. And since then, our kids have been relentless about asking when they're going to get their Haven. Now, full disclosure, Haven did send me this mattress just for this video, but I would spend my own money on these any day of the week. They started in Canada, they use a plant-based foam, and they have a charitable model that I've actually seen it work firsthand. I'll put links below so you can check out Haven for yourself. So let me show you how the mechanism works. Simply by releasing the top, you pull that out of the way, remove the two supports from the bottom, which then separate because of the magnets, and the two supports just go in place underneath. Huge shout out to Rockler for supporting the Modern Maker podcast and making challenges like these happen. I love the crazy ideas and execution that come out of these challenges. If you're interested in building this bed for yourself, I'll link the plans below. And again, I'd love to see you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you want to check out the entries I put into the last two Modern Maker podcast challenges, I've linked these right here. Take care, guys.